This also came out of my reporting background. I had covered a murder in Spokane, and when I got the name of the suspect, I ran the usual, checks on him, and he had nothing. It was like he'd been born 4 days before, and I had a source at the Department of Licensing who basically said this guy's had a driver's license for 3 months. And a cop told me this is witness protection. We get these in Spokane every once in a while, and they don't tell us who they are. When his name actually came out, it was Nicholas Matola, and he had testified in the longest federal mob trial in history, Lucchese family in New Jersey. And he had come to Spokane, immediately started dealing drugs, had murdered one of the people he was involved with. And that I just became so fascinated. But I didn't want to write just the same old story. And so one of the things that I found so interesting is that guys in the witness protection program can get their voting rights restored. And so I thought this was a great opportunity to write about real second chances, to take that Gatsby-like question, is there a second act in American lives, and put it in the head of a criminal, of a guy who's spent his whole life. And so I made my character Vince Camden a kind of philosopher, criminal donut maker, retrained in Spokane, working at a donut shop, missing his old life, still involved in crime, when in the 1980 presidential election, staring at a brand new voter's registration card, he hears Ronald Reagan say, "Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?" And asks himself that question, that really deep existential question. I got to know, I ended up tracking down myself and another reporter, tracking down 7 different people who'd been in Spokane in the witness protection program. And one of them I happened to play poker with. And I remember I gave him the novel and said, before I published it, and said, "I want you to read this and, tell me if I got any details wrong." And he said, "No, man, you got this. It was so good. The only question I have is, why would this mope care about voting?" And I remember thinking that's the whole premise of the novel, But yeah, that was really, for me, an opportunity to write a political novel, and to, again, the world that I knew at that time was covering crime and covering, stories with that deep, and I wanted to sort of blend those in a way. And Citizen Vince was, kind of, I guess, a big break for me. Won the Edgar Award, and really sort of, expanded the audience of my books. I'm working on some short stories, as I always do. And then I have a novel. I've always wanted to write a novel about basketball, which is my great love. And so trying to write about the sort of guy who just tries to make an NBA team, but probably has no chance. And again, a sort of comic novel, yeah, so that's kind of what I've been writing about. Again, I think I get lost in the idea of dreams and ambitions. And so thinking about athletes, it's really interesting. I feel like that is the first dream that dies in most of us. And so I think sometimes an athlete has a longer death than anyone, because they've been dealing with their mortality since the moment they realized they weren't going to make whatever team. Most of us maybe at 11 or 12, but sometimes you keep clinging to this dream and thinking you're going to make it. And I'm really drawn to that sort of personality. So that's the thing I'm writing now. Thankfully, this character hasn't had any children to pass that dream on to. But that is sort of, this novel partly came about. I was talking to these 2 old college basketball players, neither of whom was good enough to play pro. And they were in their 70s now. And one of them was a successful accountant. The other one was a successful lawyer. And I was talking to the successful lawyer, and I said, he's telling me about his kids and what a great life he'd had. And I said, "So if you could trade it all," and I didn't even get the sentence out before he said "one game," I would trade it all for one game. And that quality just struck me as so interesting, because, having chased basketball for years as a really marginal point guard, I sort of understood it, and so that's kind of what I'm trying to delve into, is what pushes us to chase these things that we have, that Einstein's definition of insanity is to, do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. And that's pretty much what being an athlete is, or being a marginal athlete anyway.